Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? National Tight End Day last week did not disappoint. 4 tight ends that had 20 or more fantasy points. 15 tight ends that had 10 or more fantasy points. Those are the largest numbers that we have seen all season long. But here's the question. Do we continue to see that production, or is it a 1-week thing? Because we really need some tight ends to start stepping up on a more consistent basis. And we may have found some of them heading into week 9. And Thursday Night Football potentially has 2 of those options. And we're gonna start with Dalton Schultz because Stefon Diggs was just announced as tearing his ACL this past week and will be done for the season. And we're still gonna be without Nico Collins for a couple of weeks. So when we take a look at Dalton Schultz, there is definitely gonna be an opportunity for more targets to come his way. He probably isn't widely owned in a lot of leagues right now either, and would be an easy grab and potential starter for your team every single week down the stretch. That would be huge. It's been 2 weeks since the New York Jets traded for Davante Adams. And it's been 2 weeks since I said that Tyler Conklin was basically going to be useless the rest of the season. And he's got 2 touchdowns since then, so he's really putting it to me. But you have to look at the numbers around the touchdowns. Tyler Conklin has 4 targets in each of the last 2 games. Now, 2 weeks ago, everybody was good to go. You had Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams, and Allen Lazard. So for his 4 targets, he had 7 receiving yards, but he had a target in the red zone. This past week, same thing, target in the red zone, but no Allen Lazard. 4 targets turned into 42 receiving yards. So with Tyler Conklin, I think that's going to be the key to success with him. If we don't over-evaluate the process here and we say, hey, if we don't have somebody playing, then Tyler Conklin is a good bet. But if all 3 wide receivers are playing, Tyler Conklin probably isn't a great bet. So this week right now, he's high risk for me. But if we find out for some reason that maybe Allen Lazard were to miss again, we'll reevaluate at that time. 8 targets and 6 catches last week for Jake Ferguson is exactly what you want from the tight end position. But he only had 23 receiving yards. What happened? The targets have still been there for him this season. 7 or more targets in all but 2 of his games so far. But he's just not seeing a ton of upside right now. He had 3 straight tight end 1 performances after getting hurt. And then unfortunately since then, he hasn't even been able to crack the top 28 tight ends. So for now, let's just continue to hope that the targets remain the same. If they do, he's going to end up having a big game at some point in time, and he'll be just fine. But if the targets start to become an issue at any point, we may have to bail on Jake Ferguson, and I don't want to do that. This is Kyle Pitts' 4th straight game with at least 65 receiving yards. In 3 of his last 4 games, he's gone over 70 receiving yards. And in 2 of his last 4 games, he's been over 80 receiving yards. I hate to say it, but maybe Kyle Pitts is actually safe now. If he is, that's great because you're finally getting fantasy value. I don't need 2 touchdowns out of Kyle Pitts every single week. If you can give me consistent touchdowns every couple of weeks or so, I'll take that for sure. But the receptions and the yards are what we need from him to truly trust him the rest of the year. Jonnu Smith is like on the brink of being a top tight end option, but he's just not utilized consistently enough. He's got 3 games this season with more than 50 receiving yards. He's got a couple of top 12 tight end performances as well. And over the last 3 weeks, he's had 8, 7, and 6 targets. But couple of those weeks were not with Tua as his quarterback, and Tua generally does not look his direction. He did have 6 targets last week, just didn't make a whole lot out of those. We'll see if something pops up over the next couple of weeks, but for now, Jonnu Smith, unfortunately, just isn't consistent enough for us to be looking at as a starter. Dalton Kincaid was able to find the end zone last week, and his 7 targets were second on the team behind Khalil Shakir. We'll see if those targets can continue to keep up. When you've got wide receivers like Shakir, Cooper, and Coleman, it may be a little bit more difficult for him to see consistent volume. But if we can start seeing some consistent scoring, that's where things changes with Dalton Kincaid. He's still going to have a little bit of risk, especially in tougher matchups, and until we start to see those 7 targets become more of a habit. Brock Bowers is seeing an absolutely enormous target share, and on top of that, he gets a matchup this week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who haven't been able to stop tight ends at all this season. Let's put those two things together, head on over to Underdog, and see that his current projection is 64.5 receiving yards. I hit higher so quickly on my phone, I'm pretty sure the screen broke. And if you want to lock in this pick'em with me, then head on over to the Underdog app right now and get signed up before it's too late to miss out on our October giveaway, which is an autographed Jonathan Taylor framed jersey. And all you need to do is download the Underdog app, create a new account using code word headliners, and make sure you deposit at least $10. When you do that, you're going to get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000, a special pick'em that's almost guaranteed to hit, and then when you play in your first contest, you'll be entered on our end to win this awesome giveaway. And whatever free pick'em you end up getting for this weekend, pair it with this Brock Bowers one, you might see your screen turn green. Mike Gesicki's performance in Week 8 kind of came out of nowhere. Leading up to that match over the last few games, really they were utilizing two tight ends much higher than what they were utilizing Mike Gesicki. So really I think it had everything to do with the negative game script, and more than likely Mike Gesicki is not anybody that we're looking forward to trying to put in our lineup next week. We need to keep an eye on Will Dissly for the Chargers. 7 targets last week, and it feels like he might be making his way as being the number 2 target behind Ladd McConkey in this offense. If that ends up happening, he's going to find some fantasy value. This is not a great matchup, but if we can get at least 7 targets once again, he definitely has a pretty decent floor projection. Even though all the targets last week seemed to really favor the wide receivers, David Njoku will continue to be probably one of the main weapons in this offense. We're going to see some back and forth. Last week, going up against the Ravens, their secondary was really bad, and Jameis Winston was able to take advantage of that and probably saw more open opportunities with the wide receivers than David Njoku. But moving forward, the safest player in this offense absolutely is Njoku. Hunter Henry's value this week relies on Drake May. Last week, he ended up needing to leave the game with a concussion, and no word yet on whether or not he'll make it back this week. With Jacoby Brissett, Hunter Henry is an afterthought. With Drake May, Hunter Henry is definitely somebody that's a focal point of the offense. And for the Tennessee Titans, they're using multiple tight ends in all their formations right now. Unless they start to trim down, no one's going to see fantasy value there this year. Zach Ertz's 11 targets last week led the team, and if we can really keep him around 7 to 8 targets per week, he's a guy that should be in all of our fantasy lineups, especially if you don't have one of the top tier guys. 8 targets at the tight end position is fantastic. Hopefully Zach Ertz can start to turn him into maybe some scores here or there, because right now he's got a really nice floor play, but really no ceiling. Theo Johnson is probably number 4 on the pecking order when it comes to targets right now, and given the type of offense he plays in, there's no room for fantasy value there. Carolina currently allows the most touchdowns on the season to the tight end position. Juwan Johnson could take advantage of that this week. Definitely going to be a medium risk play here. There's nothing safe about it, but scoring a touchdown at the tight end position basically puts you inside the top 12. And I know a lot of people are going to want to start Taysom Hill, and if you want to, fire him up. But keep in mind, Derek Carr wasn't healthy last week. Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener still got more snaps at quarterback than what Taysom Hill did. Taysom only had 20 rushing yards, and he didn't really do anything in the passing game either. Your Superman was unfortunately a super dud. Ja'Tavion Sanders was working his way up, seeing an increase in value. Over the last 3 weeks, more snaps, more targets than any of the other tight ends. In fact, he was near the top of the team lead in targets. Now that Deontay Johnson is gone, we're going to see exactly what Ja'Tavion Sanders could end up doing. But Tommy Tremble being the lead tight end last week is not great for his value. We probably need to give it another week to see what happens. This is a great matchup this week for the Denver tight ends, but who's the number 1 tight end? Coming into last week, it was Lucas Kroll over the last couple of weeks, but then Adam Troutman was the guy that ended up scoring. So if it's Troutman again as the number 1 tight end getting a majority of the snaps, I definitely feel a decent day and a good matchup. But let's focus on Mark Andrews for this matchup. He's got 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but the big question is, which one of you out there actually held on to Mark Andrews long enough to take these 4 touchdowns and use them towards your fantasy lineups? Probably not a whole lot of you. And over the course of those games, he's only averaging about 4.5 targets per game, so he needs those touchdowns. Without them right now, he probably doesn't end up putting in good enough numbers for you to keep him in your lineup. So let's just keep our fingers crossed he keeps scoring. On paper, not a great matchup for Evan Engram, but you've lost Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas Jr. could end up missing time, and who else is going to get the targets? Trevor Lawrence might look to his favorite tight end and his favorite target from last season, Evan Engram. And like I said, maybe this is a risky matchup, and maybe I shouldn't go this far with it, but let's make Evan Engram our Manscaped must-start tight end of the week. I love the opportunity here. Even if unfortunately this is a tougher matchup for him on paper, he should still see plenty of targets this week to help prop up his floor. And if he can find the end zone, even better. And if Evan Engram can get through this tough matchup and have a great day, that would be an awesome present for fantasy owners that really need some tight end upside. But speaking of presents, with the holiday season almost here, Manscaped is the perfect place to go for stocking stuffers or things to wrap and put under the tree. And right now, if you go to their website and check out using code word Headliners20, you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. So let's keep our fingers crossed that the Eagles don't lock down Evan Engram too often and he can give us a really solid fantasy day. And for right now, Dallas Goedert has to remain a high risk. This is a great matchup, and if for some reason he does end up playing this week, then maybe we consider it. But for now, let's pump the brakes on it and just see what other news comes out by the end of the week. Cole Kmet is definitely one of the riskier tight ends that we can try to roll out right now. Only one target last week in a game that Caleb Williams was struggling in. If Caleb Williams is struggling, I would love for him to look towards Cole Kmet a little bit more often. But when you have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen, plus you're running the football with DeAndre Swift, it's going to be really hard to have consistent value. But Trey McBride is the complete opposite of that. So much volume, so much big play potential. He is definitely one of the best tight ends in all of football right now. You can put him up there with anybody else, including even Brock Bowers, and you're going to get similar output. Trey McBride should be in your lineup every single week. If you used Sam Laporta last week, excellent. Worked out perfectly for you, which is great with no Jameson Williams. He should be back to somewhat of his normal self. And this week against Green Bay, he definitely has another great matchup once again to provide you with some really solid fantasy value. Yep, there'll still be some risk with it, just with how the season has gone so far, but I'll still roll him out there with no issues unless I have one of the top tight ends also on my team. Tucker Kraft had a big day last week, but it essentially all came on one play. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 78 yards, but 67 of those came on 1 completion, and then a 3-yard touchdown completion after that. Unfortunately for Tucker Kraft, that's what we're looking for. In this offense with what you have, and in this week with Malik Willis, we really got to be concerned about how safe he actually is, how many targets may go to the other wide receivers, how often Green Bay may even be passing the ball. And on top of that, Detroit's defense does pretty well against tight ends. Great matchup for Colby Parkinson, but with Kupp and Nacua on the field, there's really no targets that are going to be left over for him. So we'll go ahead and sit that one out. However, this is a really great matchup for Noah Fant, and another one in which DK Metcalf may be missing. Keep an eye on that. If DK Metcalf ends up missing, then Noah Fant sticks right here as a medium risk, but he trends towards being a little bit safer than what a lot of other tight ends would be. If DK Metcalf ends up playing, that stinks for Noah Fant's target potential, and he does drop a little bit closer to being a high-risk play. The good news for Mo Alley-Cox, he's got Joe Flacco as his starter this week, and when Joe Flacco plays, all of these guys have way more value to them. But I'm still going to leave his risk where it's at right now because he still has multiple other wide receivers that he'll be competing with for targets. But if you're scouring the waiver wire right now and you really can't find anybody to help you out, there's not a whole lot of dart throws out there that may be as good as Mo Cox, Mo Problems. Barring any type of setback this week, TJ Hawkinson should be coming out for his first game this week on Sunday Night Football. Now, I've got him as a low-risk play because at this point, how many tight ends realistically are you going to play with the same potential that TJ Hawkinson has? Not many. But just keep in mind, I don't know how many snaps he's going to play either. If he's limited and he only plays 25%, 50% of the snaps, that kills his fantasy value. But if for some reason he gives us pretty close to like 70% of the snaps, then he's going to be a guy that's worthy of a start. The Kansas City Chiefs are currently allowing the second most receiving yards and the third most fantasy points to the tight end position. And based on what I saw last week from Cade Otton, I am expecting a huge day against Kansas City. He has the chance to be the tight end 1 or 2 this week, depending on how good Brock Bowers does. If you're looking for a high upside play, hopefully you have Cade Otton because he will be exactly that. And look at that, Travis Kelce with a great matchup as well. Tampa Bay's allowing the third most receiving yards to the tight end position. Lock in Cade Otton, lock in Travis Kelce. Monday Night Football is going to be all about them tight ends. Yo, Headliner Nation, there you have it. My breakdown of every matchup for the tight end position here in week 9. Hopefully your tight end position isn't causing too many problems. And last week, you had plenty to choose from, but hopefully we see the same type of week moving forward because we really need help at the position. But do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and if you don't have the bell notifications turned on, do it now so you never miss any of our content when it drops. Peace out, Headliner Nation, stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.